Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. My name is Matthew, and I have the pleasure of being joined by Mr. Vincent Delitz, who is the co-founder at a company called Corbado. How are you today, Vincent?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am very well, thank you for asking. And yes, thank you as well for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. Vincent, to start off, let's, if you don't mind, if we could give our viewers a little bit of background information about who you are and what it is that you do.
So yeah, I'm as you mentioned, the co-founder of Corbado. We're a tech startup based in Munich, Germany. We were co-founded 2 years ago in 2022, and our ultimate goal is to make the internet a safer place. How do we do that? We have actually found out that most of the cyber attacks and all the phishing scams and frauds that happens on the internet is all due to passwords. And we're trying to ditch the password and replace it with something called passkeys. More on that later. At Corbado, I'm merely responsible for all things regarding product management and distribution, even though I'm a software engineer myself. So I studied information systems and used to be a software developer for quite some time. And yeah, right after my studies, I finished my studies and I co-founded Corbado, and building kind of the future of authentication of passkeys.
Fantastic. So a couple things there that we can unpack. You said even though you're a developer, you're now focused on a different side of the market. So I'd like to talk to you about how that change came about. But tell us a little bit, if you want. We can start with the passkeys. Tell us about this idea.
Sure. I mean, most of you probably know that passwords are, I would say, an inferior solution for online authentication. Just remember the kind of occasions where you went to a shop online or to a website where you remembered that you had created an account in the past, but you didn't have the password in the password manager and you couldn't also remember it. So you were kind of stuck, and then going for all the password reset flow is kind of a very cumbersome process that many people just abandon right away. That made me realize 2 years ago that there should be some better way for building authentication in 2022. And coincidentally, passkeys as a marketing term came up. What are passkeys? Passkeys basically, in simple terms, are Face ID for the web. So most of you, I guess, would unlock their devices with Face ID, Touch ID, Windows Hello. So all of this kind of biometric features that modern devices have. Passkeys bring this feature to web applications, to websites, and also native apps on iOS and Android. It's pretty cool because it's a new standard being backed by Google, Microsoft, and Apple. So basically all devices, platforms, and browsers support it. And besides this convenience that you have by not remembering a password, not coming up with one, it's also way more secure because there's no secret like a password being exchanged. It's built on asymmetric cryptography, and it's also kind of 2FA by default. And you as a user, you don't really recognize that you're using 2FA. There's no second device. It's just built into the mechanics of passkeys, which makes it really, really cool also from a security perspective, because with passkeys, you can prevent all sorts of phishing, of credential stuffing, and other password-related cyber attacks, while also increasing the UX tremendously, which is, I think, pretty cool thing for a security enhancing technology.
Absolutely. So a lot of technical stuff to unpack there for us laymen, us regular folk. It sounds like it could be quite technical, but you also make it sound pretty simple. Is this something that you said passkeys sort of came up in marketing. Was this something that you had been working on before, or is it something that you heard about and went, that's what I'd like to get into?
Yeah, so I was, as I said, a freelance software engineer for quite a while during my studies. And back then, I was working for another startup on user authentication. And that made me actually realize how complex building logins basically is. So there's so much to take care of, so many flows to maintain. And also, it was all built around the password. That made me actually spend some more time digging into passwordless authentication. So quite a funny term, I thought back then. I haven't heard about it, even though I was in IT and tech for a while. And the underlying foundations of passkeys, they were, I think, some people started to work on it already in 2020, in 2012, like 12 years ago. And it's all backed by like the industry giants. So not only Apple, Google, and Microsoft, but all major other internet companies have been working on this kind of standard for more than a decade. And this new term passkeys with some really convenient features about synchronizing the private key of it. It's again something technical that popped up basically the same time where I spent quite some research on how to improve user authentication and make it more convenient. So it's kind of a coincidence that it was around the same time when Microsoft, Google, and Apple announced passkeys as the future or now standard of authentication.
So you're mentioning some big names, and there's a lot of advancements. It's a fast-growing industry, IT development, this sort of stuff. It must be a bit of a challenge keeping your place in the market, keeping up with developments. Can you tell us about some of the things that you might have learned or are learning about staying relevant in the market at the moment with what's happening?
I mean, what's quite important also in this kind of fast-paced environment and where there's a lot of updates and new features basically every month being pushed by Google, Apple, and Microsoft, and the entire team working on the standard, is that you need to be active in the communities. So in the communities where these standards are being discussed, but also in the communities where developers who have to adopt these technical standards are hanging out. So I spent quite some time on Reddit, on Twitter, X, and some other developer forums to just see, okay, there's the new standard. It's being developed and being published by some theoretical guys, and how does it now translate into the practical issues that software developers might face? And there's a lot of reading that I do. So I kind of developed my own routine that every Monday or basically every day I start with my couple of blogs and forums where I just check, has there been any new question, any new updates, or also checking the change logs of browsers and operating systems to just discover if there's any new hidden feature, which let's say Google has added to Chrome in their beta version, and which will be made available in 3 months, so that we can accordingly prepare to this new change, adapt our product to it, and also see like how are the very first early adopters, the very first early developers handling it. Might they face already questions, or are there some uncertainties? Because we see with this new technology, we still discover new things, and it's still, even though it's been around for 2 years, it's still a lot of things that are not clear to even very seasoned developers, as it's kind of a concept change in how we authenticate. As passwords, they have been around since the very, very early days of the internet, and now passkeys as kind of their successor. They're based on a completely different architecture and principle, and it also requires some education for developers who are in the end also our customers.
What about something like AI? Big player in the game. Are you expecting a lot of influence from that side? What are you doing to integrate or manage that side of things?
Our product or in industry that we're in, I think AI plays a major role. I would say there are different other industries, tech industries, or kind of verticals where AI plays an even more important role. I consider ourselves to be kind of in cybersecurity or in the identity and access management industry. And getting access to a system will always be relevant. And I think the challenges that AI bring, or also the opportunities that AI bring, they are all built around how can we still make sure in the age of AI that a legitimate user can log in and a fraudster can't log in, and we can detect this for sure. And this is also where passkeys can be helpful. But I see a lot of more scams regarding phishing, so that people are being tricked into revealing their credentials into fake websites, or being called by phone that they need to disclose their password or other secrets to someone via phone. And this is something that also we try to combat with our solution or with passkeys in general. But I would say there are other industries who benefit more. Let's say the pure software engineering side that just develops software benefits more from AI features or co-pilots that help you build software faster and more reliable. But in user authentication and identity access management, the impact, I would say, is smaller, but still we see the effects, and also internally we make use of it to just make sure that people can log in and any scammers, any attacks might be blocked.
But a constant thing, I suppose, somebody told me once that, as soon as you invent something in this industry, there's somebody who will try to break it or beat it. So You've obviously got to surround yourself with the right kinds of people, and you've got to have the right kind of team. Can you tell me a little bit, moving more into the business side of things, about the people that you work with and how you met, how these relationships developed?
Sure. So we're a team right now of like 10, 11 people, so still kind of a small startup in our early stages. I got to know my co-founders basically after my studies when I was working on the topic, and primarily I was working on my own. So I started a company myself full-time, but back then had already kind of seasoned advisors who then introduced me to the right people where I met kind of the rest of the team. What has helped me quite a lot was that during my studies, I was quite active in the Munich startup ecosystem and also in Munich-based student clubs. And even now, some of our employees that we hired in our first phase were merely friends or people I knew already from my studies, which I had been working together with in the past already. So I knew how they were ticking and kind of what their work ethics were. And that made it kind of easy to get them on board and to convince them. Also, of course, it was a huge kind of trust that they brought into me and into the company and the whole idea. So I'm really thankful and grateful for them. In general, the team is kind of technical. We are building a tab product, which is targeted for developers, product managers, and I would say also security professionals. And that's also why most of us have some kind of developing background. I think there's only one or two who didn't even touch a line of code or just in a very, very light sense. But everyone else is a developer, and that actually helps us not only to build the product in a developer-friendly way, but also to market it in a very developer-friendly way, as developer marketing is a whole kind of nut on itself that you have to crack. It's completely different to regular distribution strategies that you might know from other products. And yeah, that's how I actually would sum up our team. It's very ambitious, very technical, and yeah, we're heavily focused on solving this kind of problem.
You spoke about in the beginning that you had a change of direction yourself, and you found yourself in a place that maybe you didn't expect to be when this started out. Talk to us about that. What happened?
I was always interested in business topics, and I thought, okay, hey, being a management consultant at one of the big consultancies might also a career that might be worth to pursue. And then by the end of my studies, I actually spent most of my time during my studies to really get a job to consulting, and had some offers on my table where I just needed to sign, and then I could start working full-time at a consulting firm. But during the end of my studies, I discovered that entrepreneurship is kind of interesting, and there's so much more to learn than someone being a consultant. And because if you build something, product, a team, and also you see how things grow from like a small seed into like a full functioning company and organization, that's so much more enjoyable and gives me so much more value and also impact that made me get up every morning at 6:30 and drive to the office and be passionate about what I'm doing. And I had a first kind of experience where I found a company in my master's program which failed miserably. So we were like 3 students, had no idea, had no funding, and we spent like half a year working full time on it. And in the end, it completely failed. But the learnings I got from it during the time, I wouldn't want to miss that. And that made me realize, hey, after your studies, you don't have like kids, you don't have a mortgage to pay off, there's no spouse. So why don't you start building something and see how it goes? And even if it fails, you can still go into a regular job or still try to get into consulting. And that's how I ended up being like an entrepreneur, and also kind of an entrepreneur in a very technical field where my study background is definitely beneficial. But during the past 2.5 years, I learned so much more, which no studies, which no other kind of job could have told me. And yeah, that's why I'm very grateful for the past 2.5 years at Corbado.
That's fantastic. It's a very refreshing to hear that. Could you maybe tell us what is something you learned about yourself that maybe you didn't know beforehand?
That's indeed a very good question. I mean, I would say I'm kind of endurable. So I kind of saw that I'm really resilient on some topics, because in the beginning of an early stage startup, you get a lot of no's. Basically, 99% of people you talk to are saying no, be it first employees. No one wants to work for an early stage startup. It's just too risky and the opportunity costs are too high. No one wants to be the first customer. Everyone says, hey, come back if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 customers, so that it's a more riskless approach for me. And no one wants to invest in your company and fund it or give it some initial funding. And that's something I realized on my way when I had the first calls, trying to get the first investors, trying to get the first employees, trying to get the first customers. You need to be resilient. You need to just cope with a lot of no's. And in the end, there might be one who says, yes, I'll invest in you. Yes, I'll be a customer. Let's try it out if it works. Yes, I'll join you as an employee. And that's something, okay, this one yes, and this one person who trusted me, something that I am actually looking forward to, and where all the other 99 no's might be actually worth. And I see many people, or I saw many other startup founders who cannot cope that much with so many disagreements or so many no's in the end. And that's something that I learned actually over the past years about myself, which I didn't know before, that I'm kind of this resilient guy who can have all these no sayers.
That's very interesting, and thank you for your answer there. I think that's an important thing, as you say, being able to deal with those setbacks and keep going and keep pushing forward. And I suppose that's where your passion comes in and your belief in your product. For any young entrepreneurs, young developers setting out, going into internet security, do you maybe have a word of advice for them, something that they could look into? Maybe you see something happening in the future that you could help them to save a bit of time. Is there anything you could share with us?
Go especially into like the entrepreneurial direction, what I also learned the hard way, and it's probably also an advice that many startup coaches or mentors or investors always tell you. The product might be as good as possible, and it might be like a technical superior solution, but you also have to market it. And actually finding the right distribution channels for a software developer or for a tech product is kind of hard. And I realized that myself. So we tried different ways of how we can distribute our product, how we can market it, to who we can market it. And if I started again, I would try to create a lot of more technical blog posts in the very early stages, because every kind of research result that you have, be it by interviews, be it by your own technical research and standards, be it by your own software engineering, might be something that some other people would be interested in. And just start writing all your learnings in a technical blog post form and just publish it. And then you will see if people find it on Google, if they might resonate to it, if they have questions, or also if they have new ideas how you could tweak things, how you can improve things. And we started that kind of late. And that was one of my biggest learning. Just start publishing your research findings, because other people are definitely interested if it's a valuable product and if it solves some kind of problem. And this could be some early channel, how to get first customers, how to get like first feedback, and how to get also product feature ideas. And as of now, technical blog posts are kind of our main distribution channel. That's where we get the most leads from. And we started it kind of late. So if you're an early stage entrepreneur and you're not really sure about what to build, because the idea will pivot a couple of times anyway, start producing this kind of technical blog post, because that's a very cheap and also very, very efficient way on how to get leads in the long term. And it just takes time until, let's say, Google as a search engine picks you up and indexes your content, but it's definitely worth it, and it will pay off in the long term.
Fantastic. Vincent, I'm going to leave you with one last one. For anybody who's interested in finding out more about Corbado, you spoke about finding out who you market to. Where can they find you? How can they get hold of you? And what can you do for them?
I mean, we're present on basically all major social media, so LinkedIn, Twitter, also on Reddit. The main channel, as I said, we have a technical blog post for anyone who's more interested about passkeys, about passwordless authentication. Just take a look at our blog. There's some really interesting content if you want to go deeper, be it from a business perspective, but also from a technical perspective. And also, we recently have set up a Reddit subreddit and also a Facebook group where we help people who have kind of issues with setting up passkeys, with like day-to-day problems, and just try to troubleshoot these problems. So in case you are not interested in the technical specification, but more on the user and consumer side, and want to understand why your passkey might not be working on Amazon, then there's the subreddit and also a community on Slack that we have, where we help people to just get things going and just let them enjoy the convenient and secure future of authentication.
Fantastic. I think that's brilliant. There's going to be a lot of people listening to this who are going to find that information very helpful, I am sure. Vincent, thank you again for today. We will be keeping our eye on you and wishing you all the best for the future.
Thanks so much, Matt. It was a pleasure having this call with you.
Thanks.